Hi everyone, this is video 2 for past progressive. It's still unit 6 in your textbook. This time we're going to learn about the time clauses with past progressive and simple past. Did a robot write this? Listen to the sentences that I used to tell this story. There are no grammar mistakes here, but does it sound right to you? Listen. My husband turned on the soccer game. He started cooking enchiladas. He went back to the other room. He looked at the television. The oil was too hot. Where was he? He was too late. He returned to the kitchen. He spilled some hot oil on his bare foot. The oil burned his foot. He turned off the stove. I came home. Do you see what I mean? It doesn't sound very good, does it? If you look at all the verbs here, you'll notice that they're all simple past. So remember, simple past is for finished actions. Let's try again, another way. What if I use only past progressive? That means I talk only about actions in progress. Is the story better this way? My husband was cooking enchiladas. Okay, that's true. It was in progress. He was also watching a soccer game. The oil in the skillet was getting hotter. Again, there are no grammar mistakes here. The meaning is correct. The actions were in progress. But did you get the full story? No, right? Doesn't sound very good with every sentence in past progressive. Let's try something else. Okay, so remember from the beginning, we've been talking about when we study grammar, we have to know the form, we have to know the meaning, or it's useless, and now we're coming to the third part, use. We have to know how people use the grammar when they communicate, when they speak, and when they write. So with past progressive, it's very common to use them with time clauses. This time the time clauses begin with when and while, and they're in combination with simple past. So it gets a little bit complicated. This is how I would really write the story. While I read, I want you to notice where you see while and where you see when, where you see past progressive, and where you see simple past. And if that's not enough, you can also look for the commas. Okay, read and follow along with me. One evening, while I was teaching my grammar class, my husband was making enchiladas at home. While he was cooking, he was also watching a soccer game on television. Unfortunately, he stepped away to look at the television while he was heating some oil to cook his tortillas. When he returned to the kitchen, the oil was smoking. When he grabbed the skillet to remove it from the heat, he spilled some hot oil on his bare foot. The oil burned his foot. There was, I'm missing the article right here. There was a big fan blowing at high speed when I came home. When he told me the story, I said, next time, don't try to cook and watch soccer at the same time. So this time, I think you get more of the complete story. And you can notice lots of time clauses. Every time clause is connected to a main clause. And there's at least this one sentence here that is a simple sentence. it is good to mix up shorter and longer sentences. Okay, so in that story, there were examples of 3 patterns of sentences. All 3 patterns use time clauses with past progressive and simple past with when and while. So pattern 1 is here. Talk about 2 actions that were in progress at the same time in the past. Here's your formula. While and past progressive. That's your time clause. Now, I didn't want too many words on the screen, but remember, there's also a subject right in there. And there might be some other words after the verb, too. Past progressive is also in the main clause. And again, you would always have a subject before the verb, right? So 2 actions, they were both in progress at the same time. So here's an example from the story. While I was teaching my grammar class, my husband was cooking at home. You should remember everything you have learned about time clauses from the other units. A lot of the rules are the same. If your sentence begins with a time clause, that's when we use a comma at the end of the time clause, between the time clause and the main clause. When you look at the last sentence, it's the same idea. The only change is I started with the main clause and I finished with the time clause. It's the same comma rule from before. There's no comma in this case. Now with pattern 1, since both actions were in progress at the same time, it really doesn't matter which verb you put with while. So it would be okay to have one more example. While my husband was cooking at home, comma, I was teaching my grammar class. Okay, so as usual, it might be a good idea to pause the video here and try to write your own example. And we'll discuss your examples in class. Let's go to the next one. Pattern 2 with while. Talk about an action that was in progress and another action that interrupted. This pattern can be written with while or when, but be careful. Okay, be careful. So there are 2 slides for this pattern, this one and the next one. And I want you to know in Unit 6 in your book, this is pretty much the only sentence pattern that they focus on. A lot of other grammar books teach all 3 together, so that's what we're doing here. Okay, so the formula is while, and then your subject in there, and past progressive. That's your time clause. The main clause has simple past. Here's the example from the story. While he was heating some oil, he stepped away to look at the television. So remember, the past progressive was in progress. That started first. It wasn't finished. It was continuing. And this verb stepped away, that happened in the middle. That interrupted. Here's the same idea. Just switch the clauses. He stepped away to look at the television while he was heating some oil. So you can write this type of situation with while, and the next slide we're going to see it with when, but we have to be careful with the verbs. Try your example of this pattern, then move on to the next. Okay, here's pattern 2. This time it's with when. Talk about an action that was in progress and another action that interrupted it. So this is the same meaning that we did with while. This time with when, your verb is simple past. Your main clause verb is past progressive. It's the same two actions, but when you see when here, draw an arrow to that verb. That verb is simple past. When he stepped away to look at the television, he was heating some oil. Which one began first? It's the one in past progressive, because that was continuing and in progress. Here it is with the main clause. He was heating some oil when he stepped away to look at the television. Okay, so the pattern 3 you're going to see next also has when. Let's go to that one, see how it's different. This is actually a sentence pattern that you learned back in Unit 5 when you did time clauses with simple past. Talk about two finished actions. Action 1 happened first, action 2 happened next. And sometimes maybe they happen together at the same time. In this case, you have when and simple past, and the main clause is also simple past. Which one happened first? The one with when. Number 1, number 2. When he grabbed the skillet, number 1. Number 2, he spilled some oil on his foot. If you start with the main clause first, he spilled some oil on his foot when he grabbed the skillet. Spilled happened second. Grabbed happened first. So these do get your brain a little bit mixed up sometimes. You really need a lot of practice. So if you need to repeat the video and pause, try your own example. I want you to bring at least one example of each pattern that you write about a story that you know. Maybe it was an accident, maybe it was kind of a little bit funny accident like this one, or maybe a serious story. You choose. Okay, so we'll keep doing lots more practice in class. See you then.